Hey team, Katie here from Equestrian Movement, and today we are going to talk about what it looks like to be a holistic horse trainer, holistic horse handler, holistic horse rider. Wherever you are in your relationship with your horse, whether it be on the ground or in the saddle, we are going to talk about what holistic looks like today. So I can guarantee you that any of the good horse riders, trainers, handlers that you are watching on YouTube, that you are following on Instagram, socials, on their email list, wherever you are following these people, I can guarantee you that intuitively they are working holistically with their horse. So what that means is that we are adapting how we work with our horse based on how our horse responds to it, to us, to our training, to what we're doing with our horse. So what we want to do is we want to be very clear and intentional about setting out our lesson plan, our shaping plan, how we're going to guide our horse into a certain behavior, and then we are actually going to listen to how our horse responds to us. So that is the holistic part. And if you watch any of the good trainers that are doing this, you will notice that they are adapting to how the horse responds to them to keep them under threshold, figuring out where that pressure point is for them. For example, we talk a lot about the horses at the school. We've got a very sensitive stock horse mare that you barely give a hint of pressure at, and she's like, yes, 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 what do you want, what do you want, what do you want? And then we've got our Australian draft horse who is very big, very sure of himself, has a lot of weight behind him and doesn't really want to do anything that he doesn't want to do. So we are going to have a more assertive level of pressure on him, just because that is what is required of that conversation when we're working with him. So you don't want to think about pressure as a bad thing. So what we're looking at, the purpose of these lesson and shaping plans, is that we're actually developing language with our horse. So the first thing that we're looking at is, does our horse know how to seek the release of pressure? Do they understand how to learn these words that we're teaching them? So what we're trying to do with these shaping plans, being super intentional with what conversations we need to have with our horse, because basically this is like teaching them A, B, C, D. So if you are working with your dog and you want to teach your dog how to sit, you have your shaping plan. How are you going to guide the dog into that behavior? There are so many ways that you can teach a dog to sit. You can decide that you're going to put pressure on its butt to try and get it to go down, or you can put the treat in front of it and try and shift its balance so that it sits that way. How are you going to guide your dog into the sit? So I call these a single age cue. So we can do one thing and then, the dog moves into the behavior that we want, and it's pretty simple. It's just one step. Where it gets super tricky is if we were going to ask for a more complex combination of cues. So when we get to doing agility with dogs, or when we get to, herding sheep, that kind of thing. So the same sort of thing kind of translates across to horses. So a single word cue would be asking your horse to stop. You can guide them into the behavior. It is one behavior and it's easy to kind of shape it and mark it. And then a complex word cue I would call your half halt or your bend, or things that you're going to be combining two of the words together. So the first thing is we need to know, our horse needs to know how to find the answer to these words. And this step is often skipped with a lot of horses because they kind of just get pushed and bullied into figuring out what the right answer is and just hoping it's right. And then, if they have a good trainer, hopefully the trainer releases the pressure, and so then they learn to seek the release of pressure. But traditionally, we didn't even know to release the pressure as just introduce a new pressure to ask for something different. So, the industry has come a really long way to get to where it is today. There is a lot of science and research gone into animal behaviorism, and the industry itself really hasn't caught up. And so if you're watching really good trainers and you really like what they're doing, they have figured this out intuitively, or they have researched and studied it. So teaching your horse how to learn, doesn't know how to find the answers. Is it seeking the release of pressure? Does it understand that pressure isn't punishment? Does it understand that pressure isn't an aversive? It's not supposed to be a tool for pain or being uncomfortable. It's like, me talking to you. Me talking to you shouldn't be uncomfortable. It shouldn't create pain. It shouldn't create pressure. Like it shouldn't be difficult. But if I was talking angrily and to a child, then maybe that would create emotional pain, right? So it depends on how we talk to them with these tools, and that is the holistic part of it, the holistic element, where we listen to how the horse responds to us. So if we're taking, our pressure-based tools, maybe like a whip or our legs or the bit or the halter, and our horse is responding to it as like, this is creating me pain, I am uncomfortable, I feel unsafe, then you're not going to be teaching them anything. They're not going to learn anything other than how to protect themselves. And so then we see horses working from a place of self-protect, feeling threatened, and self-defense. So if you're watching trainers and you're like, I don't actually know if I like what they're doing here, like, sure, they're getting the horse more manageable, but it looks pretty close to abuse, then what you're seeing is, the trainers using these tools as a form of punishment to create a fear of consequence of potentially what's going to happen to the horse. And so, some horses it does work on to some degree where you see an improvement in that particular behaviour. But if that horse were to go back to its owners who isn't going to treat it like that, then we're going to see those behaviours come back up again because we haven't addressed the core reason why the horse is behaving like that in the first place. Or you're going to see, the horse start to internalise and shut down and disconnect. And so then we're going to hear them say the behaviour came out of nowhere because it seemed like the horse was cooperative and working with you until it wasn't anymore, because what we saw as, submission was purely just like the horse really hating what was happening and them going into their happy place in their head, and then they can just dissociate from their experience. So we really don't want them going there either. Being a holistic horse trainer is being able to take your horse and say, do you know how to find the answer first before we do anything else? And then this is my shaping plan for how I'm going to create this language with you. And then when you implement that lesson plan, does your horse feel safe with you? Do they feel safe to relax? Are they feeling like you aren't a threat to them? And then secondly, we go into our compassionate leadership skills. Is your horse seeing you as somebody that they have trust and confidence in to make good decisions for them? And then we're going into our emotional agility skills, because even once we have a horse that feels safe and sees us as a leader, they can still get frustrated. They can still get, overwhelmed. They can get performance anxiety, so they can get closer to threshold purely because they don't have the emotional resilience to deal with the pressure that we're putting on them for work. And then we're going to move into our communication and cueing. So that's when we're really going to consolidate, what does this language look like with our horses? What do we need to be able to communicate to them to be able to, look after them safely and to do all of the things with them that we need to do, like have them, safe for the farrier, safe for the vet, being able to check over them, being able to rug them, feed them, like all of those groundwork things that we want to be able to communicate to them that we need to do with them, we need to do with them safely, and then working into those skills. And so this is what we are doing in our holistic horse handling program, where we have our parts of like how we want our horse to work with us. So firstly, we want them to feel safe to relax, so stay secure and connected. We're going to have a slightly different approach if our horse has experienced trauma and feels like we are the threat. So whether they are trying to run away from us or whether they're trying to pin us down to hurt us, we have a slightly different approach for those horses. And then we're going to move into our compassionate leadership skills, learning how to learn. Does your horse know how to seek the answers? The emotional agility skills, and so sorry, that's our cueing and communication as well. And then our emotional agility skills, does your horse can you shift your horse's emotional state so that you can get them into a place where they enjoy learning and they ask to be ridden? And then our holistic horse husbandry is like when we go to work with like consent and, you know, different tools that we need, like worming, farrier, vet, like this grooming, the stuff on the ground that we need just to be able to work with our horses. So let's go. We're going to have a look at what our compassionate leadership skills are going to be. So we can go into our first skill of seeking connection. We're going to talk about why seeking connection is important as a compassionate leadership skill. We're going to have some videos of me putting it into practice. And then you can look at our lesson plan. So our lesson plan is that shaping plan that we were talking about, where we break it down into the purpose, what you need to know before you implement it, what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you do it. So that's your cues. That's how you're going to communicate, how you're going to guide the horse into the behavior. And then working through the different cueing there, and then we get into the progression. What can you do next if this is working really well for you? And then, as always, we're going to come into our self-reflection work at the end of what worked, what didn't, and how can we improve on it for next time. So that's what it looks like to be a holistic horse handler, being very clear and intentional on structuring out how you're going to guide the horse into behavior, because that can be the most tricky, and you really want to be clear on your why in that point. So as I said at the beginning, is that like the how, there are so many hows, it's like you can just choose whichever one you prefer. But if you want to be really clear and intentional on your why do you need your horse to do this behavior, then you're going to think about, okay, because it's going to be like, it's going to build a stronger relationship, it's going to build a stronger bond, it's going to build compassionate leadership, it's going to build safe, secure, connected, it's going to build emotional agility. And so then when you look at your how, you can say, okay, like if I do it this way, it's not actually bringing me closer to that point, it's driving the wedge in and pushing us further away from connected, from safe, secure, connected, from compassionate leadership, from emotional agility, from understanding how to find the answer, and it's pushing the horse further into like resentment or overwhelm or not understanding what I want from it. So when you set it out really clearly and intentionally like that, you can be confident that you know how you're going to use it in the first place and why you want to use it, rather than just going, how am I going to get my horse, for example, go on the float? Like there are so many different ways that you can get your horse to go on the float. And then listening to your horse, are they responding well to how you have chosen? Or is it creating more distress? Is it creating more tension? Is it making your horse see that it's actually stronger than you? And so now it can, scare you. And so now it doesn't have to go on the float because you're too scared to handle it. So that's the holistic part, right? Is you can be comfortable that there are just so many hows that if this how doesn't work, you can go into a different how, as long as you are clear on why you're doing it in the first place. Is this lesson plan supporting you and your horse, or is it bringing you further away from each other? And so that comes down to listening to your horse and how they respond to you. And each horse is a unique individual. So even though the lesson plan is designed to go from horse to horse to horse, you're going to adapt it slightly for each horse that you work with. And any good trainer, professional in the industry is doing this intuitively. And so because they're doing it intuitively, they're not teaching it, they're not able to communicate it, because if something's not working, they're like, well, you just make them do it. Like, why can't you make them do it? And so being able to just make them do it is understanding how best to work with the horse that you are working with. And so it's being able to flex into each horse's unique personality and understand what motivates them best. How you're going to guide. Like some horses guide really well off of halter pressure. Some horses want you to guide off of liberty. Some horses really highly motivated and willing off of clicker training and positive reinforcement, whereas other horses get overstimulated and can't focus when you start introducing treats. You know, being able to, like, this is about empowering you to be able to make the choices that suit you and your horse best, so that you can say, yeah, like, I know that that is a way to get my horse to do X, Y, Z, but my horse doesn't like this. My horse does like this. So I'm going to choose this way to do X, Y, Z because I think it's going to be, you know, the most conducive to the results. And then the overall purpose is that we're getting a stronger and a clearer understanding of how to work with our horse. So another problem that I see with horse owners, horse owners in particular, is like they get me out to help them with a particular behavior, and then they show me their repertoire of skills, and they say, look, I can make my horse do this, I can make my horse do this, I can make my horse do this, and I can make my horse do this. And so it's not about what you can make your horse do, but it's like the purpose of that skill in developing communication, language, and a better understanding of your horse. How did they respond to you? You know, did it build tension? When it does build tension, what do they do? What are their body language cues if they don't understand what the answer is? If they don't, if they're uncomfortable, if they can't do what you're asking them to do, if they're getting performance anxiety, if they're getting stressed, if they're getting overwhelmed, if they're getting frustrated because they can't figure out the answer. The purpose is not to like get your horse to do X, Y, Z, like that's the end point, but it's like the communication part in the middle of getting a better understanding of how to work with your horse and your horse how to work with you, that is creating that connection. And this is what trainers that are very good are doing intuitively. They're not thinking about it. They just know how to respond to these different horses through experience, and probably because they've fallen off a lot. Like it's one of the reasons why I know how to respond to these horses, is because if you don't, then they tell you louder, and when they tell you louder, they get bigger behaviors that are harder to control, and so you end up falling off and you end up getting hurt, and so you do end up backing off and figuring out how to do it differently so that you don't antagonize them to the point where the behaviors are too big, too stupid, and too dangerous. So rather than having to go through that process of, figuring out like where their breaking point is and where you really need to be backing off because the behavior is getting too out of control, like just do it holistically. Input, like set your intentional lesson plan, listen to how your horse responds to it, and adapt it to suit your horse's needs. Okay, that's it for today. Pop over, join the waitlist, check us out, jump on Holistic Horse Handling. It is actually open at the moment. If you have any questions, message us, like email us, DM us, whatever. And until next week, happy trails. Bye.